back. It is our final week of summer camp, and today we are going to talk about design principles. We're going to go through a whole bunch of stuff and maybe a little overwhelming, but I think by having just a general overview of some of the things to key into and some of the resources that you have at your fingertips, it will all come together. So without further ado, I am going to jump into sharing my screen. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right one here. And we are going to get started. All right, share my screen. And I'm going to pop into some actual live tutorials as we go. So this week we are going to come on slideshow, pop up for me. There we go. You guys can see everything like full screen, right? Yes.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Okay.
Yep.
So this week we're working on our Design Defender badge because we want to make sure that we are applying great design principles so that our amazing services and the messages about our amazing services come through. And there are some basic principles that you can use to make sure that your designs look a little more aesthetically pleasing. And we're going to go through some of that, some of those essential things that you can work on. So welcome to week 3, our final week of summer camp. We're continuing to develop our digital marketing superpowers. And this is really kind of like the icing on the cake to the things that you've learned. So like I said, today we're going to go through some of the principles of design, basic design. And excuse me, as always, if you have some questions as we go, if you can, drop them in the chat. We'll get to them at the end. Drop them in the chat or write them down just so you don't forget to ask at the end. If there's something really burning that you have to know while we're going through things, raise your hand and I'll pop over to you. Excuse me, I have a little frog in my throat today. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a bit of an introduction to design principles, choosing the right design, choosing the right colors, I think that was supposed to say, color theory and application. Color theory is really important. It really can help to get your message across. And if you're like me, obviously I'm a designer, I'm very visually oriented. Narrowing down what I want for my design, the colors I want to use can sometimes be really hard, but when I apply color theory to it, it can really help. Excuse me. We're going to talk about layout and composition and why that is so super important. We're going to talk about visual elements like images and icons and some of the legalities involved with that. I'm going to talk a little bit about short form videos and just sort of some of the ways that you can help yours pop. We're going to go through some design tools and resources, and then we're going to have our Q&A. And then I'll talk about your homework assignment, which I think I think that was the last thing I had to put in here, and I did not get to that. So we will talk about your design assignment. I may have put it in here. So let's talk about the power of good design. For me, when I was a kid, I have always been drawn to, to graphic design, words turned into art. As a kid, when we went to Disney World, we went quite a bit more in my late or 20s, as a huge family, cousins, sisters, aunts, the whole nine. And I would take a camera. It was before digital cameras. So I had these disposable cameras. I took so many pictures. My family would get so annoyed with me because 90% of my pictures were of the signage, of the thematic areas. It was all about the design for me. I would throw a person in here and there just for a little illustration and to satisfy my family. But most of it was about the design because, obviously in Disney World, they just do it so well. And everything was thematic, the fonts, the colors, the design, the themes, it all went together. And it just always has intrigued me. So good design can draw you in. And those first impressions of the design of your digital marketing is what is going to either make or break you. um, because first impressions really do matter. You can have the most amazing product in the world, but if you've got crappy design, you're not going to get noticed as well. Steve Jobs was very famous for putting the aesthetics and streamlining, the design of Apple. He actually borrowed a lot of his components for Apple from other businesses, but he was really good at honing in the design of those areas and streamlining and making them sleek and making them look cool and new age, and recognizing that in the case of Apple, less is more. So a lot of times when we're designing things, we have to remind ourselves of that concept that less is more. Sometimes we want to pull things off. My grandmother, who was like this fashion icon of her day, and my cousin inherited that. She's a fashion designer. My grandmother's advice to all of us was, when you get dressed and you put on, your jewelry and whatever, take at least one thing off, because less is more. So I've always had that concept in my mind of like not too much things, because you want one statement to stand out and you want things to be balanced. You want your colors to sort of balance each other out. We'll talk about that. But good design and having a brand identity is going to make you more recognizable. Going back to our first week when I talked about those 7 touch points, every time someone sees you, if you're tying in that same sort of an aesthetic, it reinforces visually that this is about you, this is about your brand. And it improves user engagement, that whole concept of stop the scroll. If you've got some good design, it's going to intrigue people and they're going to stop. They're hopefully going to click. They're going to dive in a little bit more. At the end of the day, good visual content is 40 times more likely to be shared on social media. Think about when you go to your Instagram or your Facebook or your LinkedIn, the things that people are sharing a lot are beautiful. They're aesthetically pleasing. Maybe it's an inspiring image. Maybe it's an image of people that's really good. That's, Beth and I were talking about this the other day, 2 Fridays ago when the Olympics kicked off. I happened to be the lucky one who caught images of our athletes on the boat in a commercial break, because I was watching live. They didn't get shown later on. Who knew? I shared just 3 images that I snapped with my camera and I ran up to the television. Nobody else really had those and everybody was disappointed not to see our people on the boat. Well, because I caught it at the right time, may not have been the most visually pleasing image, but it's been gotten over 1,000 likes and it's been shared almost 300 times. So in that case, the design of it wasn't so good. It was the subject matter. But at the end of the day, you can still get that great reach and that great share and that great engagement when you have good design that speaks to people. It really can change a customer's perception of your product. I mean, think about even, businesses that you might have come across that their design just does not go with what they're doing. I can think of a newer restaurant that every time I look at their stuff, I'm like, there's no food in anything. It's only text. You haven't shown any pictures of your food or even of your environment. The colors don't match at all with like appetizing. And so personally, I haven't been there yet. I've heard it's good food. I'll probably get out there, but those kind of things make an impression on people. So we want to really key into good design. Now, there are some key design principles, and this graphic shows a little more than I say 6 and I put 7. See, this is totally, you see I was brushing a little with this, but we're going to go through these in a little more detail. But first, we're going to go through some of the principles of just like the basic graphic things that you can see and how they work with each other and why, and examples of where they don't work. So we're going to start off with balance. So if you look at this image, this is 9 circles, but not just 9 circles, it's balanced, right? The color is balanced. I've used in these 9 circles the same blue for the outline in each of the corners in the top left and the bottom right. There's balance there. There's some symmetry. Things are evenly spaced. Your brain likes balance, and it actually likes 9. And we're going to get into the rule of 3 and why this also is very nicely balanced and calm and engaging. Because it's calm, because it's a balanced image, your brain can then key into the 2 things that are different because they're balanced. There's some symmetry there. In this case, this is not balanced, and it actually, even though those circles are in exactly the same place, just through some illusion even, it almost looks like they're not balanced. It makes my brain have to work a little bit more versus here, it's calm. Here, it's a little bit off. This isn't balanced. That other circle on the right-hand side isn't balanced with the other one. So when you're creating aspects of your design, you want to look at it and tweak things sometimes to make sure that things are balanced in that rule of 3 that we'll talk about. Contrast is also super important. Excuse me. So here I've used my brand colors. I've used my darker color, and then I've used a contrasting color, my bright yellow. That's part of my brand. Now I could also have used white because that will pop, or something, a hue that was nice and light. You want to make sure when you have text, especially if it's text on a dark background or in a busy background, you want to have that color pop as much as possible. Here, there's not a lot of contrast. That's really hard for me to read. It doesn't stand out. I want to make sure, and I purposefully did this as a small font, which wouldn't be my recommendation, but I wanted to show with a smaller font how important that color contrast is. It's much harder to read this. It doesn't stand out as much. So we want to make sure that when we're designing that we have some good contrast, that those words pop out. Now, if this was an image and it was kind of a busy image, I might want to lighten the image and darken the text so that it popped out, or I might give the text an outline or a drop shadow. Anything I can do to make that text pop out a little bit more, make it a little bit bigger, because at the end of the day, we really want people to be able to read what we have on there. We don't want their eyes to be going crazy. I don't want somebody to strain. If I can't read this really well, nobody else can really read it very well. So contrast, balance and contrast, excuse me. Balance and contrast are super important, as is alignment. To go back to alignment here, you can see all of these circles, they are aligned vertically, they are aligned horizontally. Now, does that mean that everything you do has to be perfectly aligned every single time? No, but you do want to pay attention to your alignment, because if things are just kind of off, they're just kind of look messy. Now, this could be your intention. You could be wanting to get some sort of visual imagery, or to pull the eye down to that bright orange circle. But you still want to have some sort of flow and some idea of what you're doing. In this case, these are just not aligned. And I'm going to show you in Canva, because I will tell you it is the best tool that you all could possibly use. I'm going to show you how easy it is to align some of these things and not drive yourself crazy having to just sort of tweak it here and move it until it, no, there's some really simple things that we can do to fix those alignment issues. Another design principle that can be helpful is repetition. So in this case, we're using repetition to sort of change the perspective. So we've got all of these horizontal bars, but we've used some repetition of color in between to make it sort of jump off the page a bit. So it's a repeating pattern, and repeating patterns can be very pleasing to the eye. But then using that same repetition, but a little bit of color contrast, makes this really interesting. You could do something with this with a background, having sort of a repeating background. So repetition is a nice design element that you might want to tie into things with design patterns, with repeating patterns in your backgrounds. Proximity. So this is where we group things and we have things that go together. So you might in your design have it communicates relations. So you might have on your design, your ad, you might have your heading, which is going to show some hierarchy, your heading and your text. And then you have some design elements. You might want to make those boxes bigger and put them in the background, but you want to keep them together and align them with each other. And then realign that text. Maybe that text would come into the bottom right corner and you could make those boxes bigger and put them in the upper left. So you're getting some balance and some new alignment just to make things a little bit different and not perfectly aligned, because sometimes having some balance but moving the alignment out just a little bit can cause visual interest. Your brain is going to go, well, that's different. That's kind of off. Okay, I want to look at that. So proximity and putting like things together can help communicate your message a little bit better and help it pop out a little more. The next thing that we want to talk about is white space. This might be something that you've heard before. Excuse me. And again, to go back to Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs was all about white space. Think about some of those early iPhone ads. It was just a big white space and then like a picture, an image cut out of his product, of the iPhone. And so that iPhone said everything. And then he had maybe like one word. This is a really powerful design principle to have, that you still want to make sure you're using some alignment and some balance when you're using white space, but not having every single piece of your image filled with color and shapes and whatnot really can draw attention to what your key message is, that word. It makes things really pop. Now, white space can have color. If you look over at the left-hand side, this purple, and you see this circle offset, that gives some visual, it draws your eye in. Your brain knows that even though I'm only seeing half a circle, intuitively, your brain actually fills in the other half of that circle. So this has a nice effect. And then it's got that purple space left around it, which further draws your eye into that circle. So your brain is making it a full circle. And then where those lighter bars are, maybe we would have some text there to pop that in. So that's a use of white space, but it's color. So these are two different sort of good examples of the use of white space and how you can use it to emphasize things. So especially, and I'm going to show you this as we go down through some Instagram grids to kind of look at. This can be a super effective way of getting people to stop the scroll, because a lot of times when you're scrolling through on Facebook or you're scrolling through on Instagram, it's a full image and every little piece of that image is filled up, or somebody's got a busy graphic. And then all of a sudden they come to something that has a lot of white space and those words just pop. That captures attention. So when you're thinking about using white space, think about it as a way to emphasize your messaging. It can be very effective. It's very good to use in carousels on either that first or second carousel. We talked about that last week, that with carousels, the first time, if you're on Instagram in particular, which is where they're very effective right now, when you first post your carousel, it's going to show that first slide first. So you want it to be something that pops and captures attention. But the second time, 24 hours later, it's going to show your second slide first. So that might be another place to add in some contrasting white space or some contrasting balancing elements and sort of test it out. Which time did it get more interaction? And then lastly, hierarchy. When we're talking about design, hierarchy is really important. It again draws the eye in. So if you look at the examples here and imagine that these light gray bars are a lot of text, right? This is sort of an example of maybe text on a web page. So you've got just a whole line of justified text to the left there. There's no hierarchy there. That's a lot. That's kind of overstimulating our brain. If that was all text, we'd look at it. And especially nowadays where people have such short attention spans, that's just kind of going to be like, oh, yeah, that's too much. I don't know if I have time to read all that, even though it would probably take you like 2 minutes, if that. But if we then pop over to the side with hierarchy, this is where in digital design, it becomes really important on websites to have like a hero image at the top. Maybe that black bar that you see at the top is an image, something to draw the eye in, and then have a nice contrasting, bold headline. And so you're using a different font up there with a different color to capture attention, immediately letting somebody know that the rest of what they're going to find, the text and the contrast on here, it gives them an idea. This is what you're about to read about. So, okay, that's interesting. Now my brain is going to scan down to some of the sub headlines because we tend to scan through things. It's why bullet points are so effective and numbered lists are so effective. So when I go to a website, and subconsciously, most of you are doing this as well, you're probably looking, or even if it's a busy graphic with a lot of words on it, when you first look at it, your eye is going to scan to what's at the top. Okay, there's an image. That starts to tell me what I'm looking at. Then you're going to the headline. Then you're going to look at the sub headlines that are popping out, because intuitively we're looking for that bullet point. Okay. And then your brain is going to decide whether or not you're going to actually read what's in there. So as a marketer, you want to take advantage of that. You want to make sure that in that hierarchy, you have your key points, your key words, your key message, your call to action. That red bar might be your call to action. Or maybe it's in that gray box to the side. You want to visually be thinking about when someone lands on your landing page, on your website, on your home page, or even just at your graphic. You want people to see those top hierarchical things first. Your headline, your sub headlines, your call to action. So they know instantaneously almost what you want them to do. Because it's really, really, really important to remember that you have to capture someone's intention in that first 3 seconds. So when they land on your website, or they land on your social media page, or even land on your image, within 3 seconds, they need to be able to figure out or have a decent idea about what you're about, or they're probably going to move on by. So hierarchy and balance, all of these things come together. This image here with the hierarchy, it's balanced, right? You've got one column, but then you've got a centerpiece that's split into 2 columns. It's balanced in the middle with some contrast, with a contrasting color. It's got some repetition in the font. Everything you can see in the middle, that the short text with the gray box with the darker box underneath, they're kind of grouped together in proximity, but there's a nice amount of space between them. There's some nice white space, giving some breathing room so everything's not jammed up. And again, there's hierarchy. So this image here kind of ties it all together. So the next part of understanding design and getting it right is understanding color theory. And it's something that can be overwhelming if you're somebody like me. Like sometimes color theory is a little overwhelming because I want all the colors. I was that kid that wanted that box of 64. And then if there was more colors, I wanted the more colors, and I want the pastels and I want the brights. And I mean, I I have so many markers and colors and metallics, and I get overwhelmed in Office Depot. It's like Disney World to me. So color can be overwhelming, but if you're applying good color theory, it can help you to narrow down those choices. It can help you to make good choices as far as your brand are concerned. Again, I'm not going to mention the restaurant, but there's a particular restaurant that has a very interesting color scheme, and it doesn't really say to me appetizing food. So you want to be keeping in mind that when it comes to theory, there's actually a lot of psychology behind it. There's a reason when we think about if you've done any design in your home, if you've painted the walls of your home, you've probably gone and you've thought about, what room is going to be what color. Most people aren't going to paint their bedroom a bright red wall, right? Because that's busy and it's not soothing and calming. So that's part of the psychology of color theory. And we want to apply that to our brand when we're telling somebody visually off the bat what we're about. So some of the basics of it is that it evokes those emotions, it evokes feelings, and it communicates what you're about. Red tends to be action, passionate, energy. The reason you might not, paint your bedroom red, though it is love and creativity. So maybe you might paint a special room red, but not the room you're sleeping in. And it flows down into that bright orange. Whereas orange is optimistic. It has warmth. It's got passion and freedom. And it's a little bit different from that red. You move down into yellow. Yellow is fun. It invokes curiosity. It pops. It has some clarity to it. It's the reason I chose to use yellow as a contrasting color in my brand, because it invokes clarity and curiosity. Green tends to be more soothing and nature-like. It gives some safety. It also says go. So it can have, you having green in your color palette that works with some other colors is a good thing to have. Blue gives you trust and authority. If you think about financial institutions, you'll probably notice that a lot of them, corporations, blue tends to be a based color for a lot of places like that, for a lot of financial institutions, corporate things. Doesn't have to be all of them. You'll see some that work out of the box. Like I think it's Fidelity uses green because they have that prosperity and wealth. That's one of their main colors. So when we talk about color theory, this is to use as a guide to give you ideas. It is okay in design, and in fact, in art and design, it's always encouraged to think outside the box. So don't feel like you have to be boxed in, but it is good to apply these, at least in some ways. Purple is more majestic and ethereal. It's spirituality, royalty. And then of course, pink, Barbie pink. I mean, Barbie, their whole concept for that movie, their marketing, that is a case study in itself, how brilliantly their marketing was done. And think about how many different brands, different products used that concept of Barbie and Barbie pink to apply to their own. I mean, there was Barbie pink bubblegum ice cream, Barbie pink clothing, there are Barbie pink trends. So obviously, that's a very strong color. And Barbie, from way back when, has established that bright pink as a femininity color. We used that after the first Trump inauguration when women protested. They had their pink pussy hats. So it has a very strong connotation to femininity. So you want to think about when you're deciding on your brand colors or you're rebranding, you want to think about how strongly those colors are associated with things and whether or not they can be associated with your thing. So you think about what your ideal client is looking for, because remember, it's about them, not necessarily about us, but what is going to attract them? What's going to create the feeling? How can you create that feeling that they want to have when they're interacting with your brand? So you want to think about that when you're applying your colors. Another thing to think when you're creating your brand palettes, and we want to create a brand palette, so you don't need just one color. You should have ideally one or two key colors that you're working with, and they can be harmonious, or they can be contrasting, but you do want to have other colors that play into that. And I'll show you a bit of that in a little bit. But when we're talking about our brand colors, you want to make sure that they have some harmony. So in the color wheel, and color, you'll see whenever you're looking at color, and there's so many awesome resources that you can Google online. Google color wheels. Adobe has a great color wheel that you can play with for free. And I'm going to show you some of their color palettes that you can look at and how they work. But again, we're going to look a little bit at Canva too, because their colors sort of work really well when you're creating your brand. But when you're doing it, you want to think about, do I want primary colors, those basic red, yellow, blue? Or do I want secondary colors? Your secondary colors are going to be those colors that are in between your primaries, your orange, green, and purple. And I want you to take a look really quickly at these. That's those secondary colors, the orange, green, and purple, they work so well together. They have contrast, they pop against each other, right? When I was doing wedding planning, I loved that, those three colors together in floral arrangements. They just kind of popped really well and they were fresh. And then you've got your tertiary colors on the color wheels. Those are the colors in between your secondary colors. And when we talk about them, we want to make sure that whatever you're choosing as your primary colors, I shouldn't say not primaries in yellow, red, blue, but your key colors, right? We want to make sure that we choose some complementary colors, whether they're secondary or tertiary colors, that are also aligned with the same sort of tone and tint. So to make that make a little more sense, think about, you may have heard, again, if you're like doing some interior design or whatnot, we talk about pastel colors, right? Pastel colors are sort of, they're those primary colors, but they have a tint applied to them. Tint is when you add white. So pastels are very soft. Whereas you have your jewel tones, right? Your really bright, saturated, beautiful colors. Those have a little more purity to them, but they might have been shaded a little. They might have a little black added to them. You don't have to worry so much about like knowing and using these terms perfectly, but having a basic idea of what a hue is. Red is a hue. If we wanted to tone that, we would add a little bit of gray to it, and that would give you like some of your different reds a little bit. You might add a little bit of orange. We have some orangey reds. We have our purpley reds, right? So those are getting a little bit to the other sides of the color wheel. But then when we take red and we add some white to it, then we start to get into those pastels, the softer reds. And believe it or not, pink is actually not red with white applied. It's actually like the purpley in between red and purple with white applied, which is kind of weird and odd. And then a shade is going to be that darker, more saturated color. It's got a little bit of black applied to it. When you start to really work in design and really play around with colors and maybe use some of the tools, which I'll show you in Canva in a moment, I'll show you how you can quickly move through your color and maybe get a tint or a shade. And there's some great tools built right into Canva that will help you do it easily. But just having an idea of the color wheel and how these all work together will help you so that you don't have random colors that don't have anything to do with each other and kind of don't work well together. Again, we're sort of, if we look at the color wheel here, this sort of brings it together a little bit more. So if we look at the yellow at the top here, right, we're adding a little bit of white that gives us the tints. This circle in the middle gives us the tints. But if we add a little bit of gray, it tones it, right? It gives it a tone. And then if we shade it, we add black to it and makes it a little darker, a little more saturated. So this kind of just shows you on the color wheel where you are. And so you want to make sure when you're choosing your colors that you're kind of using some balance with them. So for example, my colors are sort of the tertiary, or the tertiary turquoise, which you can see at the bottom. You can see it off to the left, right? And then I use that yellow at the top. And I use a pretty bright primary yellow to contrast. And then I also use like a corally color. So if you look, they're kind of almost a triad of colors. Those tend to be my colors that I use the most. And then I have a darker blue that I use for a lot of contrast. So I have purposefully chosen these colors. They have a shade, that dark blue in my title, whereas I would call the base of it, where you can see basic design for great content, that would be more of a tint and maybe a tone as well, because it's a lighter. I've added some white to it, but I've added maybe some gray in there as well. So when we get to talking about color palettes and your brand colors, this is what I mean about wanting to have colors chosen that work well together for your palette. Think of it, and we call it a color palette because it is kind of like those watercolors that we use when we're painting, right? And you might have your vibrant watercolors and your pastel watercolors. So if you take a look at these all really in line with each other, work well together, both vertically and horizontally. I mean, mainly they're done horizontally, but if you look at these vertically, even they kind of work together because we're going through, a light to dark and they have some contrast with them. The next thing to know, especially when you're talking about digital marketing, is that in digital marketing, we use more hex codes. A hex code is this 6-character combination that you can see below every single one of these colors. There's a hashtag, and then there's a 6-character code. And that 6-character code specifically tells your computer, it tells your iPhone exactly what color that we're representing, down to the pixel. It's amazing. If you're doing print design, and this is where things can get tricky, where you may want to work with somebody who's a professional designer, these hex codes, when you print them out, they're going to look a little bit different on paper, because digital design we're looking at on a screen, so it's being illuminated from behind. Whereas with print, we're actually laying the color down on something. And it's not being illuminated from behind. Instead, it's actually soaking in. So when we're doing print design, we talk about CMYK colors. That's like when you have your printer, your desktop printer, your ink cartridges are CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Those are the 4 main colors that we tell it with a different code. There's a completely different CMYK code for example, for the top left yellow, that sort of yellowy orangey, that would have a completely different CMYK code than that hex code, because if I just printed from here, it would look a little bit different. And if we're really trying to be exact about our branding, then we want to differentiate. But because we're talking mainly about digital design here, I want you to understand how these hex codes work. So with these hex codes, pure black is 000. I tend to use, like the font here, I like a dark gray, which is 3333. So going from 000 to 999, you're going to get some tints and some shades in there, but they're all going to be blacks. Whereas pure white is FFFFF. Now, if I wanted a little off-white, it might be FF00FF. So when we're getting into colors, we're mixing those numbers and those letters, and they all represent something. Reds tend to have F's and C's in them. So when you get into it, it's kind of interesting, and you can start to remember your colors. Like I remember one of my brand colors for my wedding planet business was FFCC00. It was an orange. So it can be interesting, and you will see over time some repetition and sort of get an idea, but you don't have to memorize these whatsoever, because things like Canva and design programs are going to help you with that. But I just want you to know that you should know and have a representation of those hex codes, and you should have them listed somewhere if you are very clear about your brand colors. And I will show you a trick to do that. So the next thing we want to talk about that's really important in our designs, in our graphic design, is typography. And we want to know the difference between a serif and a sans serif font. These are just the basics, serifs versus sans serif. And they do have some different usages. So a serif is that little tail, the little tail on the R, the little tail, the little swashy thing on the S. Or on the F on the end, it's got that little kind of hook, that little tail, or the foot on the R, the I, and the F. Those are serifs. Whereas a sans serif font is very clean. It has clean lines. It doesn't have any of those little foot things. So just knowing the basic difference between a serif and a sans serif is super important. It's also very interesting to know if you dive into fonts, and that's another one of my obsessions. I'm obsessed with fonts. It's also good to know, just sort of design-wise, that if you think about it, if you're reading a paperback novel, again, it's something that's printed on paper. Actually, because it's on paper and not illuminated from behind, serif fonts tend to work better in print, whereas sans serif fonts tend to work better for text, for body text. Sans serif fonts tend to work better on website design. So there are exceptions to the rule. There are some that work okay, but they tend to be more readable. So when you're designing your website, when you're designing maybe a lot of text on an image, if you're doing an infographic or something, the body of it, you want to probably stick with a sans serif font as opposed to a headline. A headline you can get a little more fun and funky with because they're bigger, they stand out. And so we tend to work with serifs in headlines or subheadlines and keep serifs to the body in digital graphics. It's kind of flipped on print design. And when we're talking about books, when you're talking about bigger, bolder design, you can have fun with it. So I want to show you just some font pairings because these are really important, and this should come into your branding. So some examples here of some font pairings that are using that serif versus sans serif. They're readable and they kind of work well together. So the first one that we've got here is Georgia. Georgia is a very classic font. It's pretty much on any computer, even if you're on a basic old computer. Georgia is a very classic font, as is Helvetica. Helvetica was designed in the 70s, so it has sort of that 70s mod feel. It went out for a while in the 80s and the 90s and the aughts, but it's kind of back now. I'm a huge Helvetica fan. It's very clean. It has sort of that Apple, clean, modern, streamlined feel to it. It works good as a heading in bold, or it can work good as a body font in digital design. You can also play around with some of these different fonts. Once you decide on two main fonts, a heading font and a body font, within them you'll find that they have bold. Sometimes they have light versus heavy fonts in them. So once you get into narrowing down to your main font, your heading font, and your body font, you have also some flexibility in playing around with things, whether you're going lighter or darker with some of these fonts. You want to be careful about getting too heavy with your heading fonts, but you might play around with shading and some of the things that you can apply to it, outlines and things like that. If you want more of a playful script, Lobster is kind of a playful thing. So that's where you're getting into these fonts that are a little more sort of handwriting. The one that I use at the top where it says example pairings, that's one of my brand fonts. It's called, now I can't remember what it's called, but I'll pull it up when we get to Canva. It's called Emphasis or Exciting something. But I like it because it kind of looks like a marker, like, you know, a teacher's writing things down, but it's still kind of nice and balanced. So I like it because my content tends to be more on the educational side. So you want to think when you want to use some of that psychology for your headings, this is where you can get something that really speaks to your brand, and you want to go a little more simple when you get into your body text. But you want to have things that sort of pair well together. You can go to something like Google Fonts and play around with Google Fonts, and they will give you suggested font pairings. You can Google font pairings for fashion, font pairings for design, just to see some different examples of things that work well together. But also feel free to experiment. I just find for myself, I tend to Google things and look at samples because otherwise I could spend days, weeks, months looking through fonts trying to decide just the right one, and it drives me crazy. Another good one to look at here, another classic, is Times New Roman. That was what the first word processors that we used back in the 80s. They used that Times Roman. If you open up a Word document, often it still has Times Roman, or now it has Calibri, which is their version of Arial. So Times New Roman serif font works well with an Arial font. Playfair is it's a nice serif font, but it's got a little more drama to it, sort of like a playbill sort of a font. All of these fonts that I'm showing you here are purposefully, I pulled them, every single one of them, including my brand font. They're all available in Canva for you to play around with. And then another one at the bottom here, this Montserrat and Laura. This is where we flipped, where we've got that sans serif as a heading. It's very clean. It's very sturdy. It kind of gives, that would be good for maybe like a financial or a corporate sort of a feel, or maybe a very high-tech design. This gives sort of some feeling of stability, architecture. And then the Laura serif font gives it a little bit of playfulness to work with it, and gives it a little bit of a contrast so that we see the difference between the headline and the text, rather than keeping it all the same and applying like two sans serif fonts, which you could do if there's enough of a difference in the weight of them. Weight is bold versus light. Okay, so now let's talk a bit about imagery. And this is where I'm going to pop out for a minute. So this is one of my brand images for my St. Croix. I also have it loaded up to my stock photography agency, which I'm going to show you in a moment, which is iStock. I don't host anywhere near enough of my images on iStock. That's one of my SMART goals for the next couple of months, is to get more images loaded up there for sale. But the main thing to keep in mind for using imagery is that you want to think again of what do you want to convey with this image. So to contrast this, like if I look at this image, this obviously speaks to tropical. It speaks to tropical, to vacation. You can see some people on the beach. It's, soothing. The colors are soothing. Whereas this is another image of St. Croix, purposely use St. Croix images. This is a sugar mill. This speaks to history, but it also speaks to sturdiness. And it doesn't give that same feel as this beach feel, though they are both St. Croix and iconic St. Croix images. So you want to think when you're choosing images, and maybe choosing a little library of key images that you use throughout some of your graphics to establish your brand. You want to think about where you're getting them from. First, you want to think about what's the feeling that I want to get. You want to have sort of a consistent style to them, maybe put some images that evoke your brand colors or pull your brand colors from maybe some key images that you love. You want to make sure they're relevant to what your ICA is going to want to feel when they're interacting with your brand. You might not want like bubblegum candy or macaron cookies. Maybe an image of a bunch of macaron cookies perfectly stacked. Maybe you wouldn't use that for, a new cookie geared to kids like Oreos. That would say something a little more elegant and soft. So think about the imagery, the image you want to evoke in people's imaginations when they're thinking about your brand. And those are the kind of images that you want to pull in. What I want to be very mindful in sharing with you is that, and it happens a lot. Most of the time when it happens, it's, just somebody not knowing. But you cannot just Google an image and pull it off of the internet and use it in your brand, especially when you're marketing your brand. You are stealing somebody's stuff. You need to make sure that if you are using an image in your marketing, if you are selling something with an image on it, whether it's a card that you designed and it has an image on it or anything, you need to make sure that you have the rights to use it legally. You can get in a lot of hot water. Trust me. I have had local businesses use my images without permission. I give them a chance at first and let them know, pull it down or pay me, because I have expensive equipment that I use to take those images, and then I take time to edit them. And I have learned over the course of years and years how to take these images. There is an inherent value. This is in what you do. When you take an image on your phone and you post it to the internet, you automatically have intellectual copyright, and you have copyright to your image that you took. So this isn't just about me. This is about you too. Somebody cannot just come onto your website if you took that image, and they are not allowed to just use it. And it actually violates the terms of all social medias. If you go into the terms and you read them, you can share a post. And that's where sometimes people get mixed up when you see people posting, you can't use my content, I don't give you permission. It means nothing to them. When you log into social media, you agree to their TOC, their terms and conditions. But you can share that. That's why that's in their terms and conditions, because you can go to that post and you can hit share. You can share that to your timeline. You can share that to other people because it is still linking back to the person who originally created it or who purchased the copyrights. So for example, when somebody hires me to take images for them, like Beth for Casa de Vista, when I have that contract with somebody, I'm specific about what their copyright usage is. So in the terms with Beth, she can use all of the images that she paid me to take. She can use them anywhere she wants. She has purchased copyrights from me to do that. I also retain the copyright to use those images for promotion, for me to do further photography, or for me to promote other things. I maintain the copyright because I am the artist who created it, but she purchased the rights. So it's very important to know that you cannot just simply go to Google and copy something and use it in your stuff. Sometimes you won't get caught, but trust me, especially as AI gets smarter, you are going to get caught. So don't do it. Just don't do it. Plus it's stealing. Now, you can use stock imagery. And so, for example, and we're going to pop in a second to Canva. Canva, the reason why I encourage you to use Canva and encourage everybody to use the paid version of Canva, because Canva pulls in images from iStock. So I am a photographer for iStock, and I'm going to pop out right now and show you this. I'm going to share. I'm going to switch share screens. Okay. So I'm going to share this. So if you go to iStock, I had to take a test, and they make sure that not just anybody can be a stock photographer or post stock images for iStock or Getty. You do have to know about balance and composition, and you actually have to go through a process to get approved. So I'm very excited to say several years ago I was approved. I've not uploaded anywhere near as many images as I should, but I make a little money off of them, which is nice. So these are stock images. You could go to iStock and you could purchase, for example, this image, even though I might be taking it down because I really do use it a lot in my own branding. So you could purchase this for $12. I get a little bit of a commission from that, or you could get a free trial, and the free trial is $29, and you're limited to 10 images a month. Or you could have Canva, and you could have Canva Pro, and you could have access to iStock images for free, unlimited. And that Canva Pro, I pay what, $14 a month for Canva. So I can go into Canva and I can choose a template, or if I come in here, I use this AI image, but if I come over here and I go to images, hold on, if I go to photos, let me go over here and I search for a photo of St. Croix. This is actually one of my iStock images. If I pop over, this is how I know that they're pulling from iStock. If I go back here, you will see as I scroll down, this is actually one of my images. So I put these up here. iStock acts, or Getty actually is what powers it. Getty acts as an agent for me and gets my images out there to you. They pay me a royalty for my images. It's not a ton. But over time it can add up. But the reason I want to point this out to you is because you could pay $12 for this image, or you could pay a monthly subscription. I was paying Adobe Stock $40 a month to have access, but it gives me more than just images, and iStock will too. You'll get graphics and other things, but I actually canceled my Adobe because I have access to everything right in here. This is my image and I don't have to pay for this. If you are using the free version, you could get this image, but you would have to pay $1 for this. If you're using Canva the way you should and starting to really use graphics, it's going to add up really quickly. Canva Pro is $120 for the year. That is 10 images from iStock. That's a month of images, and you have unlimited. And it's not just images, it's elements, it's graphics, it's everything. So this is why I highly encourage you to sign up for the Canva Pro, because you are going to use it, and I'm going to show you in a moment how you can apply other things to it. But just know the reason I'm pointing it out right now is because by using Canva and then pulling in this image, you now have legal copyright to use this. You have legal copyright per Canva to use this in your promotions. So I could, if I see it, come to you and say, where did you get that? And you could say, I got it from Canva. And then I'm going to say, okay, as long as you didn't just copy it from the internet. But it's just important to know that you need to ask yourself two things every time you use an image, or even a graphic for that matter. Did you create it? Or ask three things. Did you create it? Did you pay for someone to create it for you? And did they give you the copyright to use it wherever you want? Because photographers will limit that sometimes. They might limit it to digital usage and you have to pay extra for print usage. So you want to know, what was my copyright parameters? Are they unlimited or are they limited? Or three, did you buy it from a stock, or did you get it from a stock agency where the royalties are taken care of? You can also you can Google royalty-free images, royalty-free graphics, and go, to a site on Google and find that. You will find royalty-free things that you can use. Just be careful with those. As an artist, I think it's important to give artists credit, and especially as we get into this age of AI, anything I now upload into iStock, I am giving permission for them to utilize it in AI. And so that's something that I'm starting to think about, how much I'm putting up there and what I'm going to add. And I'm going to get a little more restrictive with what I have in there. So it's just something to keep in mind. But it's so important to make sure that when you use something in your marketing, now you can use something for editorial. If you are doing a blog post and you're dropping an image in the middle of your blog post, you want to make sure that you are giving credit if you are using it editorially. There's more leeway for editorial things. It's good to know that if you are out at a parade, at the St. Croix parade, and I take your picture and you're in the middle of the parade, I don't have to get a model release from you because you are in a public place, and by law, you are giving permission to be used in things like that. So I could sell that picture of the crowd, but I don't have to get model releases from everybody in the crowd. Now, if I was taking a picture just of you, at Point Udall, pointing something out, and I wanted to then use that image commercially on iStock or somewhere else, I would need to get you to sign a model release, and I may need to pay you something. So these are all things to keep in mind when it comes to images and the legalities that come with using images in your marketing. Let's get past that one. Okay. We're already at 1 o'clock, so I'm going to try and go through some of this. So the next really important thing to think about when you are working with your designs is layout and composition. This kind of goes back to that concept of balance and alignment. The best way to sort of start off when you're first starting to really key into good design is to use the grid system. And there's something really cool that's called the rule of thirds. It's a design principle that actually goes back to the Fibonacci sequence in nature. If you're familiar with the golden rule and the Fibonacci, that swirl, that perfect swirl that we see in shells and so many things in nature. Well, it actually, when you break it down, the golden rule comes down to this rule of thirds. Our eyeballs tend to, and our brains tend to break things down into thirds. So you'll notice if you have a camera and you press down on your shutter halfway, you might notice sometimes a grid come up of thirds. This is giving you some idea of how to create some interest and some balance. You don't always want to have everything right in the middle and centered. That can get boring. But when we're using this rule of thirds, we can kind of look at where this is where those 9 circles come in that I said looked really balanced, right? They were in all these boxes. But when I want to start to get some visual interest and I want to actually stop the scroll and not just keep things so harmonious and balanced that it's like, oh, I'm just going to go by. Oh, that was pretty. I'm going to go by. No, I want you to stop because, whoops, something was different there. I might look at moving an element into where these lines connect in this rule of thirds. I do this when I'm composing an image. I'm paying attention when I go back, for example, let's see if I can go back. Go back. You know, why aren't you letting me go back? I might have to click on here. Okay, go back. So for example, I've cropped this image, but when I took this shot, this little point of the dock right there, because this shot was, it was a horizontal, I made sure that little dot, that little point there was in that bottom corner in the middle. So you look at that middle square, that bottom left corner, I made sure when I was composing that image that overlapped right there because it would draw the eye in. So there's a way for us to draw people's eyes to things when we're clustering things. When we have words, we might put them in the top corner and then put an element in the bottom corner. So we want to use that visual hierarchy. And I'm going to show you again. Whoops. I'm going to show you again. I'm going to pop out again. And I want to show you why, again, Canva is going to make your life amazing and easy. So this is a quick little trick I'm going to show you in Canva. So I have just a square here, right? You can create multiple pages. I have multiple pages in here. So this is just artboards that I was working on. So in this case, I can go over here to File when I'm in Canva, and I go to Settings, and you can see I have clicked on Show Rulers and Guides. I'm going to add guides. Automatically, Canva gives me some options. The first one that I go to is this rule of 3 grid. I could choose 3 columns. I could choose 12 columns, all depending on what I can customize it. But in our case, I want to show you this rule of 3s. So I'm going to now add guides. Now, these are just on the artboard. They aren't going to print anywhere. They're not going to show anywhere, but now they're going to give me some ideas of where I might want to apply some visual elements. So let's say, for example, I was doing a design about coffee, right? So I might use this nice little coffee cup, and I can use it for free because I have a Canva free. So let's start first, just do something very basic and simple, right? I'm going to put my coffee cup in the middle here, and then I'm going to go and choose some text. I'm a coffee person, so I'm just going to use this sample text here. It's exactly what I need. Let me put this maybe in the middle here, right below it. I'm going to change this to some of my brand colors. I'm going to show you momentarily how this works really well. This is another reason why I highly recommend you are using the paid Canva version. You can have one brand in the free version, but I have multiple brands that I can toggle between. So I have Casa de Vista in there because I've done some work for her. So I'm going to toggle over to my St. Croix, right? Maybe I'm doing this for my St. Croix. I can have multiple color palettes, but this is my main brand color palette. So I'm going to, which is similar to some of the stuff that I use in Cindy Lee Media because that's how I go. Now I can take this and see when I'm moving this, how it pops up this pink line. That's telling me I'm perfectly centered. Now, if I move up and down vertically, it will now tell me this is exactly in the center. Another trick that you can do while you're doing this is if you hold down the shift key while you're moving, you will move only vertically. You'll move a little more vertically or horizontally. It won't be as easy to move all around. Like here, I can move all around, but if I hold down that shift key, I'm going up or down. So now I know, okay, I'm aligned in the middle. Now I'm aligned perfectly in the center, but I want to bring it down a little bit, but I want to center it, right? Okay, so I'm a coffee person. Now let me just find some other little elements here. Let me get some coffee beans so I can add another little visual element in here. Coffee beans. So I'm going to use, oh, I like these. I'm going to drop these in, right? So here's another little element. So I'm going to drop this in here. So I'm a coffee person, right? Everything is perfectly aligned there. That's kind of nice. Maybe that's big. You know, I want to add one more little element. Maybe I want to add like a banner below this. I'm going to add a banner to give it a little pop and a little contrast. I like this one here. Oh, I can't easily change the color on that. The difference between graphics and photos is that you can easily change the colors with a graphic. I'm going to choose the graphic because I can change this. I'm going to put this in my brand color, my darker one, or my document colors. I'm going to pull this up here. And now I'm going to change the color of this. I'm going to make it this yellow contrasty. Now, you notice it's behind that, right? I need it to be in front. So here's another wonderful thing that you can do with Canva. If you click on position, it's going to give you 2 options. You can arrange it, so I can tell it, put it in the center or the middle without having to move things around. But I also can click on this layers palette. This will change your life when you're designing in Canva. Now, all I got to do is drag this. So you're literally stacking layers. This is something that we used to only be able to do in like Photoshop or Illustrator, but Canva makes it so easy now. So now I've easily just dragged this down below. So it's below. If I make this bigger, you'll see now it's below those coffee beans too, right? So I'm going to put this, I want to make this a little bit bigger. It's kind of a splash. I think I want this to be coffee related. So I'm going to click here on this color. Now, I don't have the color from that image there, but I can get that easily by coming over here. I clicked on this plus in the corner. I'm going to click on my eyedropper. This eyedropper is going to let me sample colors from anything that's on my screen here. So I'm going to drop into here and you can see all the pixels pop up. I like this dark coffee color. So now I've changed it. So now I've got some symmetry in here, right? So I'm going to also go in here and feeling passionate. That's my brain font. And it was something exciting. I'm also I want to get this like nice creamy color in here, right? But a little bit brown, but so now I'm going to come over here. It's actually taken this, but I can It saved it, right? Now I can resize this. Okay, so now I've got this in the middle. Make it a little smaller maybe, or no, what I'm going to do, I want this to pop, but I want it to come out of that. So I'm going to go over here to effects. I'm going to give it a nice drop shadow. I'm going to make this a really dark, dark color. I'm actually going to make this black so it even pops against there. So now I've got it popping, right? So everything is nicely aligned and balanced. Ho hum, isn't that kind of freaking boring? Now I'm going to apply my rule of thirds. So I'm going to give this some more visual interest. I'm going to align this, and you can see things kind of get pink as I align them, those guides there. So I want this to be visually off to the center there maybe. And I want to bring this down maybe a little more over here. And I don't even care that it's going off a little bit to the side because your brain's going to know that. But I'm going to balance this on this line over here using that rule of thirds. I'm going to balance this down here. And now I'm going to bring these guys down here. That's a little busy. So maybe what I'm going to do is pull this up here. So I would spend some time tweaking this quite a bit. And this is why, folks, when you hire a graphic designer and they're like, no, it doesn't just take me 3 seconds to do something, because I'm going to play around with this. I'm going to play around with how it balances. I'm going to play around with where things are on the grids until I have something that's visually stimulating. I want something to pop even better with that. Yeah, maybe. I want a more contrasty color. I like that better. So that contrasts a little bit more. But I'm going to play around with this until it's a little more visually interesting. That's a heck of a lot more interesting than when everything was perfectly stacked, right? So I would spend more time tweaking this, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I wanted to show you some of those little design things that are amazing right here in Canva for you to use. And when you're creating your graphics, when you're tweaking things, especially if you're using the paid version, you have so much at your fingertips, like literally limitless things. But this is available in the free version. Remember, you go to File, Settings, Show Rulers and Guides, and then you can add guides. You might want to be doing something in columns or rows. But this rule of 3, having that guide up there can really help you as you're creating things. I could maybe add a box in here somewhere at the top, and maybe I wanted this to be the very top third, right? Well, very quickly, I can balance that box right up there like that. Now I've got something that's perfectly in the top third. So use this. It's a design tool, and it will help you get better design that flows better with people's eyes. All right, we're going to pop back into Canva again. Don't you worry. So that's some of the important stuff about using layout and composition. So there's so much more I could go into about that, of course. And you saw with like visual hierarchy was me making that coffee cup really big as compared to the coffee beans. That way I was giving some hierarchy to the actual coffee cup itself. So your eye was going to go to that coffee cup first, and then sort of look at the words. So you want maybe the words where your call to action, you want that first, but you want to be thinking about that. So when you're using designs, I want you to start thinking about this rule of thirds. If you just start with that, it is golden, and it will change how you're doing things in so many ways. Just if you look at this is an AI image. But even when you're taking photos in composition, just want to point something out about this AI image. If you look at this, it's almost like this is two triangles put together, right? There's like a diagonal line that goes right through the middle of this, and this guy is sitting along that diagonal line. That's how I cropped it on purpose, because this creates what we call a leading line. Your eye kind of looks along this line, and then the horizon cuts along the top of this. I wanted to get some of that palm tree in there, and you'll see this line is close to the middle. It might not be perfectly in the middle because that's boring. Perfectly in the middle, perfectly centered is boring. We want to add some visual appeal. We want to stop people for, even if it's a 1/10 of a second. And let me tell you how important a 1/10 of a second is. I just learned that my island niece missed the Olympics. Christine's on here. Riley told me, is she on here? Yeah, Christine's on here. Riley told me she missed the Olympics this year by a 1/10 of a second. So a 1/10 of a second is really important, guys. We're going to see her in LA though. But so I just want you to keep in mind that that rule of thirds, if we applied that grid over here, we would see that certain elements fall into that grid nicely, and then we can play around to get some visual interest. So I want to talk about batching and streamlining, and this is also going to make your life so much easier. Because really, at the end of the day, with camp, I want you to be applying good design principles, but I also want to make your life easier. So you don't have to start from scratch creating your designs. Again, this is Canva, and I'm going to pop over to this momentarily. But there are billions, I don't know if it's actually billions, maybe it's just millions right now, but eventually I'm sure it'll be billions of different templates that you can use for your designs based on the keywords that you pulled up. Here I just said Facebook sales to pull up some things that would work in Facebook for sales. This is a great way to batch your designs and start to work on batching your content based on your calendar and your SMART goals. So let me show you. We're going to pop back over to Canva real quick, because I do have that one up there. And I want to show you how quick it is, especially if you're, oh, why didn't I go there? Should go there. I guess I didn't pick the right thing. No, that's my slideshow. Oh, there we go. Okay. So if I come back over here to Canva and I come to this template, right? This gives me some options. I could put anything in here. Let's say, I'm going to say, Suzanne's on here. And Christine, both are dive business people. I'm going to say scuba divers. I'll just say scuba divers. We'll come up with some templates that have to do with scuba divers. Okay, so here are some really cool things here, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So let's go to this one here. And let's choose this one. This is a great, this is a great one that you could use as a cover for a reel, or you could just use it in Instagram or Facebook, because it's going to take up more than a square. So people are going to notice this faster. So now I'm going to customize this template really quick. And so this isn't my brand, right? It's not my brand colors. It's pretty close, but it's not my brand colors. So what I'm going to do is, now that I'm into this design, I'm going to look over here on the left. And because I have Canva Pro, I can click on styles. Now, I have a bunch of different color palettes here. I'm going to choose this one, my color palette, into the blue, and I'm going to click on it, and boom, it just applied it to this template. Maybe that's not exactly how I want it, so I can keep clicking on it, and it will cycle through some different options. It's still applying my brand colors here until I see something that I like, right? So I'm quickly applying my brand here. Now, this is not my brand font, right? So I'm going to come over here to the font, and I can quickly look at text styles. It's giving me my font. I can change the size. So, you know, I'm not going to take up too much of your time with this, but it's showing me these are the fonts that are used in the document versus these are my fonts. Or I can search for other fonts as well. I don't have to use just my St. Craig. I pop in here and I could look at the business. This is the Cindy Lee Media. I could look at my Cindy Lee Media fonts, and I could click on that, and it will apply automatically. Now it's applying my brand fonts on here. So you can quickly apply your stuff, and then you can go in and you can tweak your wording, you can tweak your fonts, but you can add your images. I could go down here to photos that I have loaded up, and I could tweak this. It's giving me some recommendations. I can use this because it's a magic image recommendation, so I know it's royalty free. I can double click on this to change where it's cropped. So I can quickly go in here and make this template my own. But I started with a template, and it's got things aligned. You'll see here, this is applying the rule of thirds. These are 3 different levels. Now, and then it's cut down the middle, but our eye is moving from place to place. I might add some color on this, pop a color there so that stands out. That's not enough contrast, so I'm going to add a little contrast. So you can see I can quickly do some things. This looks very professional. So I want you to look at using templates, but then put them into your own branding. Now, I'm going to go over here quickly because it's worth it. And I'm going to go to File. Wait, I'm going to go to Home. so that I can show you where this brand. So when you go into Canva, in Canva Free, you can create one brand. It's nice to be able to create multiple brands depending on what you're doing. In my case, obviously, I'm working for multiple clients, so it's helpful. But you just go over here to brand. And I'm going to go quickly to create a new brand, just so you can see. I'm going to add new, and I'm going to call this Social League, because I don't have a brand for Social League, and I really should. It would make my life easier. So, okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on add logos. So I do have a logo for Social League. I don't want to have to upload it. I think I can go over here to, no, that's going to pop down to graphics. I do need to upload it. So I'm going to do something really quick. So I'm going to go to add new, upload logos. And I'm going to go to downloads because I downloaded something. So even though this isn't exactly my logo, this is one of the logos. Oh, I'm going to pull this one in. This is your Design Defender badge. I'm going to pull this in, and I want you to see magically what happens. It automatically pulled in the colors from that logo. So this is my design, and it named it based on that. So this is my Design Defender. I'm going to keep that. I can remove it, but it automatically does that. I recommend if you have an image that you want to pull colors from, or it can be a graphic, it can be a logo, it can be anything. It does not have to be a logo, but the trick is upload it to your logo. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pull up last week's badge because this had a little different colors, but you'll see that they're similar. Now it's pulling up the Content Crusader. So it's slightly different, but also notice it automatically gives me my hex codes underneath it. So it does the work for you. I could even just come here and I could add, upload logos. And I can come down here. These are color palettes that I pulled, and I'm going to show you where I pulled them from, a little trick. I can pull this in. It's a color palette, and boom. Now I've got the color palette here from that. And then I can go here and delete it because it's not a logo. I don't want it in my logos. Those two are. So I can quickly do that. Now, where I got those color palettes from, and I want you to write this down because it's a really good tool, is I'm going to go over here and put it here. It's color.adobe.com. And I think I may be logged into my Adobe account. So it will show a few things that I can do that you can't, but I will log out if I am. It's just taking a minute, sorry. Probably because I have too many things open. Need some things, and because my internet is still giving me issues. I'm not going to talk about that. Come on, color wheel. Pull up. Okay, there we go. So yeah, I'm logged in. I'm going to log out so you can see what you can do without having an Adobe account, because you can. Okay, so what's really cool about this color.adobe.com, remember we talked about color theory and the color wheel. You can play around with colors here. You could take one of your colors from your, this is pure black, but I could go over here to my Canva, to my branding, and I could go in and I can double click on this and hit Control C and copy that. I can come over here to the color wheel. I can, will it let me do it? Yeah, I click, no, it would want me to pull in an image. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to do this really fast. It won't let me do that. Will it let me change it? Oh, I think if I add a swatch, yep, add a swatch. It's not going to let me change these. Anyways, okay. I thought it would let me drop in our hex code. RGB is going to be your hex code, but it's not doing that. Just to show you real quick, if I wanted it, is it going to show me CMYK? No, it's still going to show me. We're going to stick with RGB. Sorry, ignore what I just did there. But if I pull this in here and I have some of these colors, I can play around with this color wheel. Let me get a sort of a triad going. So here it's letting me do custom, but I can come over here and I could say, give me a triad based on these colors. These are not the colors that I want. It's adding some different ones in. So you can play around with this. There's different things that you can do playing around with it. I'm not going to beleaguer this too much, but you can use this to start to come up with some of your color palettes or play around with things. But even easier, and this is free. Go to Trends. And in here, you're going to find color palettes that are based on industry. You don't have to use your industry, but these are what are color palettes that are trending by industry right now. Adobe's done the work for you, right? So there's fashion, there's graphic design, there's illustration. This UI UX is like web design, app design, architecture, if you're doing interior design, game design, wilderness, flavor. I went into travel. So if you pop in here, you can then look through, and what I love about this is it's visually stimulating to start with because they're pulling in color palettes based on images. So all you got to do is come in here and let's just say this was the color palette I was interested in. Now, because I have an Adobe account, I can download the JPEG, but you don't. But that's okay. You're going to go to a snipping tool or you're going to screenshot this. So I'm going to use my snipping tool really quick, and I'm going to do a new snip. And I'm just going to copy this color palette right here. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to quickly save it to my downloads folder because that's the easiest place for me to find it really fast. So I'm just going to quickly save it in there. I don't care what it's called. Now, so this is a trending color palette. It's already harmonious. It's balanced right. It's got the right colors. Now I'm going to pop over to my brand kit. I'm going to go to add new. I'm going to upload logos. It's not a logo, but I don't care because it's going to do the work for me. And boom, now I have this color palette from Adobe right in there. Now, it didn't pull in all of them, but that's okay because I know what these hex codes are. So I can go in here and I can look at that screenshot and I can pull those hex codes, or I can go over where I shot it from, and I can copy the colors. So I just hit copy. It copied the hex code for me. I can go back over here and I can say add, and I can just Control V. And now I've got that hex code in there, which is slightly different from that one. And if I want that brown, I go back over here. I just copy this, click on it, copies it, hop in here, add new, and boom, I've got the brown. So you could do it either way, but I like things that make my life easier. So I just wanted to show that to you because deciding on colors and fonts can be overwhelming, especially colors. But use this tool, use this Adobe tool. It's fabulous because it is based on real world trending things right now. And if you start looking through, you're going to find something that aligns probably with what you like. Alternately, you can see that they've used an image. You can do the same thing. You can come in here and you can upload an image. I think I did it. Let me just pull an image in. Okay, let's just use this guy. You can pull in an image and it will pull colors from that image for you. So use this to start to define your color palette. Don't go too crazy with having 800,000 color palettes. Have one main one and then maybe a couple fun extra ones that you sample colors from. But this is a quick and easy way to do that. Now, this is in our brand guide, right? I'm creating this new brand guide. I also can come in here, and if I know there's a font that I want to use, I can go in here and I can say that I like this Playfair. I want to use that for my headlines or for my titles. I can quickly tell it that I want it to be super big. I can go in here, I can tell it what I want for a subtitle, and it's automatically going to apply these to that brand kit when I go over and I use a template. So I can go through fonts. I can tell it what kind of brand voice that I have. This is good for if you're working with a team, but it also, if you're using some of the magic AI stuff in Canva, which is another reason to get the Canva Pro, because it's all included. You can drop in images that you took or that somebody took for you and make sure that you have them in there so that you can quickly apply them. If you have graphic elements that you use, or you can go into Canva, find a graphic element that you really like. If I go into this template, I got rid of my other one, but I could maybe I liked that little graphic right there. And I wanted to use this element. I could then take this element. Also, when you click on these elements, and you right click on them, you will get other options. So I can go ahead and I could copy this and I could put it on a new page, a new blank page, make it really big. And then I could download this element and then I could upload it into my brand kit if that was something that I wanted to use a lot. So I just wanted to show you that because you can sort of play around, add graphic elements, add icons that then you're going to apply when you are using these templates. So if I go back over here to this template, I don't know, I pulled it up 5 times here. I should have saved this brand kit. Let's see if it's saved. It should have automatically saved. So now I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to look, close out of these other things so it comes up faster. I'm going to go to my styles. I'm going to now go and look for that social media, social league one. There's the social league. I'm going to select the brand kit. And now I can go through and I can apply whatever colors I want. So that's going to apply them. If I go over to the fonts, I can then apply the fonts. My text styles, I can go ahead and apply this instead, right? So there's lots of ways to make things quick. So once you've defined your brand and your brand kit, use something like Canva, create a brand kit. You can refine it. You can change it over time. If you have Canva Pro, you can create a few different ones that you might want to play with that are slightly different, maybe based on your different ICAs. But keep your main brand colors similar because you want to still have that brand identity. So this is an amazing tool in Canva that you can use to apply these design principles to make sure that when you are creating good content there. I want to go back to the slideshow. You're creating good content that's balanced, but you don't have to start from scratch. These are professionally designed templates. Find one that you like and then make it your own. You can move elements around. You can leave it just like it is and apply your colors. You will start to notice over time how many professionals out there are using Canva because you'll start to recognize some of these templates. And so lastly, I know we're going over a bit. I hope that's okay with you guys. So I just want to show how important that branding is when you're batching and streaming. So I've applied something fancy that I've pinned. You can pin 3 pins to your Instagram at the top. I actually created a design that I broke up into 3s. I might do a little tutorial on that, how you do that. So this stays at the top. So when you're looking at my reel or my feed, you automatically see this. It draws the eye in because these 3 things work together, right? But what I want to mention as you scroll down here is when you look at if you scroll down on my feed, I purposefully, when I create a reel or when I create an image, I make sure that I know in that square area, and you can create even guidelines that show you where that square is going to be when you're working in Canva. I make sure that that square area that shows that there is text that pops so that quickly when you're looking at my feed, it has some balance, but also you can quickly see what things are about. And I have hooks on there. These are text hooks that are drawing you in, top 9 reasons pineapple tarts are the best. What are they? Okay, somebody's going to click on that and go through that carousel. And the second slide on that is similar, but just looks a little different. You can see next to it the real point of view. You're actually living your teenage dream. It's got a great shot from Buck Island. It's got some text. You want to learn more, you're likely to click on that. Cruise and Rum. I let the image do the talking there, but I made sure that the text is legible when you're looking at my feed. So making sure that your text is legible is super important because that's going to draw people in. I'm going to show you just a couple of professionals that use that style. So this is Amy Porterfield. I've taken some high-level classes from her. I took her the Digital Course Academy, which is amazing. She's definitely a guru in the field of online courses. But you can see this is her Reels feed. So her Reels, she's using for her cover image, whether she's pulled it straight out of the reel itself or uploaded a cover image later on. And you can do that. You can go back to a reel that you posted 6 months ago, go into Canva, create a cover image that is in your brand, and you can edit that reel and add that cover image at any time. Keep in mind that that middle section is what's going to show on your feed if you have the reel showing up. So you want to keep track of the balance. But here you can see she's got images in her reels. So that, I mean, text that's readable. So it's got a hook in there. It's drawing me in. I want more. It's not on everything, but it's on a lot of them. And there is some cohesiveness to it. This is Jenna Kutcher. She's also another guru in the field and happens to be Amy Porterfield's best friend in real life. So Jenna, you can see very clearly her color palette here on her reels, on her cover images. And you can see that she doesn't use text all the time, but she uses it enough that when I go and look at her Reels feed, I see a cohesive brand here. I see it's a lot about Jenna. I know she's a teacher. So there's some things in there that get me hooked in with some text. And then I might start to scroll through because she gives really great content. And once I click on one of her Reels and find it really valuable, I'm going to scroll through more of her Reels. So this is where you're using some of that design appeal and using your cover images on your reels, because short form video, we talked about this before, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, all of them, they are in the business of keeping you on their app. So the longer somebody stays on your content, the more it tells the algorithm that you've got something they want to promote. So reels and short form video are really great, even if it's a 3-second text over a palm tree swaying. If it's a reel and people stay on it because it has a great hook and some compelling imagery, then it's telling the algorithm that you're keeping people on their platform longer. That's why carousels work on Canva or even on Facebook so well, because somebody's scrolling through. They're not just looking and scrolling past. Oh, that was a pretty image. I'm scrolling. That was a pretty image. I'm scrolling. That was pretty image. No, wait, there's a video. I'm going to stop the scroll for a couple of seconds. Maybe I don't even watch the whole thing, but I've stopped it at least for a couple of seconds. Or I see a carousel that's intriguing. It's got a great hook on there, some text that tells me I'm going to learn more. So I'm going to scroll through. Okay, great. It's kept me on the app. I've done my job for the app. Now the app's going to do its job for me. And the algorithm's going to say, hey, she keeps people on the app. We want to promote her content a little bit more. And that's why that short form video or carousels are so important and why they rule over single image posts. Okay, so we are going to take all of those design things that we learned and we are going to apply them to your SMART goals. So last week we defined what your content pillars are. We used that matrix to fill in some ideas, to brainstorm some ideas of what kind of content you could create that was educational or entertaining or inspirational based on your content pillars. Now you're going to use those to create some content. I'd like you to try creating some carousels and maybe even some short form video. It can be just a few seconds. It doesn't have to be some long drawn out thing. You don't even have to be in it. One of the really important things with short form video that you should be capturing, I'm going to go full screen right now. I'm going to stop sharing. One of the things that you should be thinking about capturing with your phones, no matter where you are, is something called B-roll or called beauty roll. We call it in, back from news reels, like when somebody was on the news and they're talking and then all of a sudden they're still talking, but there's like an image of a parking lot or a beautiful palm tree or Frederickstead, when they were here for the President's Day. That's all B-roll. It's beauty roll. So I want you to be paying attention when you're out and about, especially on the island. We have infinite B-roll, but it could be you're in the coffee shop and you got a nice cup of coffee or something. So you're going to use your phone and you are going to take some B-roll. You're going to just go to your phone and you're going to go to video and you're going to hold it. You're going to make sure it's clear. You're going to make sure that it's nicely centered and that it's nice video. You're going to hit record. I recommend recording at minimum, especially if it's just like a palm tree swaying in the breeze. I do it all the time. I recommend like 15 to 30 seconds for something like that. That's just something still. It could even be a static coffee cup. You take it something pretty that's an image and it's not moving, you can turn that into B-roll by taking some, just taking some video. Put that in, you can, adjust it a little for the color in your phone. And then if you're doing Instagram Reels, or even if you're doing Facebook Reels, I recommend editing in either CapCut. CapCut is a great tool. There's a free version and there is a paid version, but CapCut is a really popular reel for TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere. It's a really great editing. Or edit right in Instagram. I edit most of my stuff right in Instagram. The editor is amazing. What I do is I will edit just my stuff without text. I'll add in my videos, my video clips, maybe some images, whatnot. And then I will download that without any text. And then I will go into Instagram and I will add some text on there. And then I'll post it to Instagram. You can also even batch and schedule by going to advanced. When you get to the screen where you put your caption in, look down to the bottom. There's going to be something that says advanced. You can schedule it out. Also, make sure when you're creating reels in whatever platform that you're using, take advantage of notating where you are. That location actually helps with the algorithm. So if it's footage about St. Croix, tag location St. Croix. If it's footage about Indonesia, tag location in Indonesia. If you are traveling and wherever it is, it's actually going to help with the algorithm. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. I add my text for Instagram in Instagram, but then I take that edited video. If I'm going to do a Facebook reel, sometimes I'll download it fully with the text and then I'll upload it into Facebook. Or I'll add my text in Facebook. The Facebook Reel editor isn't as good as the Instagram Reel editor. And that's why I do my video editing and my transitions in my phone on the Instagram app. And then I'll upload it to Facebook. And then I might add some Facebook text if I'm doing blank, but usually I will just download the whole thing. What you won't be able to download is any music that you've applied from Instagram. You'll need to reapply it in Facebook or in TikTok. You won't be able to cross over and download that image because of royalties to do with music. And we all know those can be dicey as well. So, okay. So let me go back to here. Okay. Hold on. Why? Oops. Escape. I went to the wrong thing here. I'm going to go back to share. Sorry, guys. Lost my stuff. Share. Let me go back to my. All right. Share. I'm going to go full screen. But I'm going to go back for 1 second because I did put some stuff into your homework assignment. And then I'm going to answer some questions because I do see some hands raised. Okay. So your week 3 assignment, I did put it in here. So what I want you to do is I want you to use Canva, or if you have another app that you prefer to use or another tool, I want you to start to create your color palette, define your color palette. If you already have a logo and you already have a color palette from your logo, that is a-okay. But I want you to pull it into a source like Canva where you can quickly apply those colors and you can get those hex codes so you can use them anywhere. I keep my Canva brand guide up on my computer a lot because it's easy for me to access it even when I'm working in another program. When I'm working in my Adobe professional programs, I actually have libraries. I can apply it from there, but it's a really great thing. I also want you to define your fonts and I want you to create those in your brand kits. Bonus if you add in some images and some graphics, but I want you to do that. And then I want you to choose a template and I want you to create some carousels or reels or a few images that are branded with your branding. So I want you to take those templates, apply your branding, apply some of these design principles we talked about using your stuff. And then I want you to go into our Facebook group and I want you to drop them in there so that we can help help critique them. We can give you some feedback on them. And then if you've posted them onto your Instagram or Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever, I want you to send that link to us so we can go in and interact with it and give you some love. Okay, now we are at Q&A. Oh, I was the one who put my hand up. I won't like that. Put my hand up. All right. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question. I don't see anything in the chat. I know it was a super lot and we went over, but I think it was hopefully all worth it for you guys. Questions? Questions about the assignment? Questions about any of the stuff? Is everybody feeling super overwhelmed? I hope not. I hope we got some good design principles. So I want to see you applying some of these design principles, whether it's designing an ad, whether it's just an informational post about something. But if it is, even if it's an ad, I want you to experiment with those carousels. And here's a really cool thing about the carousels too. They do not have to be square on Instagram. You can make them a little bit bigger in that 9, I think it's like 9 by 16 is the dimensions, is the aspect ratio. When we talk about aspect ratio too, think of building blocks. So 1 to 3 would be 3 blocks in one row. 3 by 3, which is a square, or 1 by 1. So we're talking squares when we say aspect ratio. I want you to apply those, and I want you to create some graphics, and I want to see some carousels, especially with your branding, or some reels if you're feeling that you're up to doing some reels, and then tell us where they are. All right, guys, if there's no questions, no comments, no feedback, all right, then I will let you all go and get to work. Remember Wednesday. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. No, I was just to say thank you. It was great.
Oh, you are so welcome. You're so welcome. So yeah, so we have co-working on Wednesday for anybody who wants to drop in. Totally optional. We don't record that, but I do give feedback if you're in there. So feel free if you have time on Wednesday at noon to pop in. And then Friday we'll do our final. I hope everybody can make it, or if you can't, let me know. But we'll do a little celebration and celebrate what you guys have learned. So pop stuff into that Facebook group so I can show some love to everybody. All right. Have a great day, everyone.